we now have Union54, which is the first card issuing API in Africa, where you can start integrating today, and then in 48 hours, you can be issuing a virtual card in your app or a virtual card on your website.
And without further ado, Perseus, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here, so that people can learn more about you and your journey and the story of what is now Union54. And in fact, it wasn't Union54 just not very long ago. It was something else, right?
Exactly.
So I'd love to start off with two nicely rounded questions. One, what was it before it was Union54? And even before you get to that, how did you start Union54? I'd love to hear a bit about your journey, about how it became what it became and the name change.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me. I'm very happy to connect once more. So I'm Perseus, one of the founders of Union54. In a quick summary, Union54 is a set of APIs to allow African software companies to issue cards, debit cards, without needing a bank or a third-party processor. Before we zeroed in on that opportunity, we spent the last few years trying to become a challenger bank for Africa, because our thesis was that Africa is the youngest population, youngest continent anywhere globally, and financial services, as they were 3-5 years ago, even today, were not well equipped for this growing set of young people. But at the same time, technology was getting better and better. So we just said, let's get ahead of the pack. Let's develop a bank for young people. And in that process, we just eventually stumbled onto Union54, which we'll get onto later. But a bit about me, I was born in Zimbabwe. I grew up in the UK. Studied law and psychology, thought I was going to become a lawyer, worked for a little bit at the UN in Geneva in the ethics office. And then when I went to visit in Zimbabwe, we just quickly realized that you could be having so much fun developing more important products that you're going to be using in your personal daily lives. And that's how we came to where we are today.
That's amazing. That's funny that you say that, because I studied law in the UK as well and thought I was going to be a lawyer. And lo and behold, two fintech people are sitting across the internet, talking to each other like this, sharing their stories. So
how unoriginal!
I know, right? We're starting a trend now. I'm starting a trend now. But I think Perseus, could you from studying psychology, working with the UN, and then deciding to do fintech, right? And you came up with the first name of the company, which was Zazu, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why Zazu, and what was it originally? It was the bank only, or was it the purpose, or what was the real burning issue for you?
When we started the company, it wasn't even doing fintech. The original inspiration for me to start a company was after I had seen people growing vegetables and farm produce and struggling to sell that to people who would pay them equitably. So the first idea that we came up with was using a Raspberry Pi to send SMSs and let farmers in Zimbabwe say, hey, Perseus, my name is Michael. I'm growing 2 tons of cabbages. they're gonna be ready in the next 2 weeks. Can you find me a buyer? So we'll take that information, put it on a web page, and then supermarkets like Pick and Pay would use that to get in touch with the farmers and just buy. So it was like a marketplace. And the first time that we came into a challenge was, number one, we didn't know how to call it. So we called it farm efficiency, which was like making farming efficient. And then
you're not from the marketing department, at least.
No, I'm not.
We know that
now. Not anymore. They won't let me anywhere near close. And then after that, we just realized that the biggest problem wasn't that farmers didn't have information. It's that they didn't have access to good quality financial services. So they didn't know about mobile money, and they didn't have any, like what you'd call fintech today. And as a result, they couldn't participate on the global economy. So we decided to just study the market a little bit. And one of the cool things that we did in hindsight was just repurpose the Raspberry Pi to be able to educate people around better financial services, to educate people around how loans work, how insurance works. So after 18 months, we managed to reach over 2 million people in Zambia, just really learning and teaching people. And it's only when we sat down to analyze all of that, it's like, hang on a minute. The biggest issue is that people know what insurance is, but people can't afford it. And people don't really trust insurance sales guys. And people know what banking is, but they don't make enough money to be able to deposit and then be charged a monthly fee from that. So the best thing we can do is to just develop an entry point into financial services. And at the time, our thinking was we can give you a prepaid card connected to a ledger that we have developed, and then give you the ability to purchase airtime, give you the ability to send remittances, to be able to actually get a better idea of how you're spending your money. And that's what was Zazu. And Zazu is still going today. It's go over $1.5 million in transactions a month from around 20,000 people. It's growing purely word of mouth. We're seeing more and more people from across Zambia relying on it to get salaries, to help them make decisions and to get better insights around their money. And it's only when we started developing that prepaid card, we just realized that the opportunity for us wasn't to actually develop solutions for consumers, but it was actually to use all of the knowledge that we had gained from interacting with the smallholder farmers, from interacting with the regulators, from interacting with Visa and with MasterCard, to be able to help more Perseus in Nigeria, more Perseus in Kenya, to actually just hit the ground running. So we spent, I would say, the best part of 4 years just developing a small product here to get a better idea of what people were looking for, using that insight. And the culmination of all of that effort is that we now have Union54, which is the first card issuing API in Africa, where you can start integrating today, and then in 48 hours, you can be issuing a virtual card in your app or a virtual card on your website. And the end result is that entrepreneurs today don't have to spend as long as I did to do research to figure out what really works, because we've done all of that hard work. We know what the card schemes are thinking. We know what the regulators are worried about.
That's incredible. I mean, it's and there's so much more to dig there. But before I can go any further, I'm going to hand over to my esteemed colleague Ronit to take over the conversation and dig a bit more. Ronit, please.
Thank you. Perseus, again, a name-based question. Union54. I should have asked you before we went live. I'm guessing it's a reference to the 54 countries in Africa, but it might be something completely different. So what does Union54 refer to?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. It's the number of countries.
Yeah.
Hopefully that doesn't change up or down in the next 18 months. Otherwise, it's a whole.
You're running a risk. You're running a risk there.
Marketing department's going to kill you again, Perseus.
Yeah, number of countries in Africa.
Right. Mm-hmm. And why? I mean, obviously, that the name in itself is a vision, right? That it's Pan-African. So tell us a little bit about this kind of idea of wanting to be, a service, an API-based service for the whole of the continent. And behind that question is the old kind of discussion about Africa is not a country, right? Because people sitting in Europe or in the West Coast will say, "Hey, I'm going to Africa," and people will be like, "No, it's like it's massive. It's got a lot of diversity. It's not a." Yet there are tech entrepreneurs such as yourself, and you're kind of interesting because you built your business outside one of the big hubs, like the kind of Cape Town, Joburg, Lagos, Nairobi, and maybe now Cairo. These kind of 4 or 5 big hubs. You're coming from if I can say, outside the hub, the main countries. Those 4 countries, I think, have like 80-85% of the VC investing this year in Africa. And you've got this vision that's for the whole of the continent. And so walk us through that. Like, how do you build for a continent that's so complex, so diverse, and you're doing it from outside of the big centers.
Yeah, so I would say the idea of Union54 wouldn't have been possible to execute maybe 2 years ago. But
Right.
what the pandemic did, it just showed people that for companies like us, we were already remote first before even the pandemic. All of our developers were coming from several different countries, even designers in Argentina, as early as 2017, 2018. But what the pandemic did, it just showed that capital is willing to jump on Zoom and to be deployed, even if before you have a first in-person meeting. And then I think one of the events that really framed my thinking personally is when the pandemic started, and even before what was happening in the States with Donald Trump. It just showed that African financial services for me were too reliant on products that we're developing on top of that we don't have that much control or even input. And for me, that represents a structural risk in the way that we're thinking about the future. Because if you believe that there's more young people in Africa than anywhere else in the world, and that there's more people coming on the internet from emerging markets, of which Africa is an important number in that, then it shows that all of these people are going to be interacting with new products for the rest of their lives. They're going to be needing a product that helps them to make peer-to-peer transactions from Zambia to Nigeria or vice versa. And if you're developing those products if you're just like a rent seeker, effectively, you're always going to be at the mercy of the people who control those platforms. So those were two things that shaped our thinking. And at the same time, we were running Zazu and we were learning quite a lot. So we'd get inquiries from Mozambique, inquiries from Ghana. And yes, Africa is a diverse market, but there is maybe 3 or 4 things that unite everybody in the world. And one of those things is that I always feel like a mug when I purchase something and I feel like I've been ripped off. And number 2, people want to have more control over their finances. People are trusting less and less these big institutions. And they're now developing communities around finance. They're now developing like credit unions, like these SACCOs have been incredibly popular since time began, right? So for us, it was like, okay, we've learned that consumers, whether they're in Zambia or in Nigeria, want to trust the institution where they're banking with or doing their financial services on top of. And number 2, it's really hard for you to be able to stand a card program, whether you're in Zambia or in Lebanon or in Brazil. You're going to go through the same processes. And having learned all of that, the biggest market that we could find was not, let's help Zambian entrepreneurs to do this better, but let's just accept that the same process that we went through, people in Nigeria are going to go through, people in South Africa are going to go through. Therefore, yes, Africa is a diverse market, but for this particular problem, we're all united in that you can't make it shorter, you can't make it longer unless you're using Union54. So Africa is the target market. And I think developing outside of the hubs is a really interesting point because over the last 6-7 years, there's been a lot of capital which has been going into Africa, but for maybe 85-90% of that has been going to the same markets that you spoke about, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and even Egypt. But what we have realized is that we've actually benefited from being outside of those markets, developing and taking a slow and steady approach and developing a competitive platform that now we've got at least 150 clients integrating into Union54. We almost have a client in each country in Africa. And all of these guys know that we've been around for the last few years. They know that we've got expertise and they trust our services.
Perseus, you said you've got almost a client in every country. That's an amazing spread. A couple of follow-up questions. Who are your typical clients? How do you build for Africa in terms of, you mentioned something about not using products maybe from the, not being on, whether it's from the US or the West. What's the kind of Africa-centric or an Afro-centric version of, you know, an API-based fintech? What's specific about serving Nigeria or Malawi or wherever?
So yeah, because we've been doing fintech in one form or the other for the last 4 years, we actually have a little bit of a network. So we've got a unique advantage in how we do biz dev. But the product that we have right now is an API that allows you to issue a US dollar virtual card. Because what we have seen is that fintechs in Malawi, they all start wanting to develop maybe a closed loop system. And then at some point they have enough users that those users are saying, hey, thank you so much for this fantastic wallet. I now have a balance with you at the end of the month, but I can't spend that balance outside of airtime, electricity, DSTV. What can I do to be able to use this on PayPal, or what can I do to be able to buy even a Netflix subscription? And for those fintechs, they can either go do a direct integration with each e-commerce platform globally, or they can come to us and we give them the ability to issue MasterCards for now on top of their existing apps. So what we then do is make sure that consumers in those markets have access to the global economy. And for these companies who are integrating into us, they can only spend maybe 48 hours if they're quick, or even if they're slow, a week and a half before they're in production. So that enables them to focus more and more time on their core product, and also bought in these nice features that are also going to help them make revenue. And when we look at the use case, it's not like people want to be able to use virtual cards on Zambian Kwacha websites or virtual cards on Nigerian Naira websites. They all want to participate on the same platforms that their peers globally are using. Therefore, for us, going with MasterCard was like an easy decision, because it gives you that global acceptance with very little effort from day one. But as we grow, and this is where it comes back to the structural risk that we have identified, as we get more fintechs in each market who are integrating into us, we then actually start having the ability to do push-pull payments between different fintechs. We have the ability to be able to do domestic settlement, or just like allowing merchants to be able to speak to other merchants and actually get better insights around what's working and what's not working. So it's almost like you were developing a new scheme. How would you do that right now? Because if you wanted to compete with Visa, with MasterCard, you've got to say, okay, these guys have got 30,000 settlement banks globally. That's like a unique advantage. But if you then take the view that the fintechs in Africa are the ones who are driving the financial inclusion agenda, the fintechs in Africa are the ones who can communicate betterly with capital allocators, and they're the ones who are actually helping people become more technical because they've got like talent programs. You need to develop solutions that are going to help those people today. And then as you show your competencies over the next 5-10 years, you then be able to have a discussion around the table and say, what is the future that we want to develop, and how can you inform that?
Thanks, Perseus. Back to Gaurav.
Thanks, Ronit. Perseus, that's super interesting. I mean, congratulations on all your achievements so far. You know, I wouldn't ask you the question of whether you consider yourself a success yet, because I guess, you know, for every founder, it's until the job is done, you're not the success, because you still have your vision to implement going forward. But moving away from the business itself, right? Looking at the continent and the interest it's got from a lot of people, it's super interesting. I've been investing there for a while. My friends Zach at Launch Africa have been investing for even longer, and you know, and we were investing, and it's become recently very hot. But I want to focus on this exposure fundraising from our region and then globally inward, right? And I think this is important for founders to also understand. So I want to put that into context of two things. One is your journey, and you elaborating on that, and I'll walk you through what I'd love for you to share. But the first thing is, how old is the company? When did you first start the actual company?
19th of October, 2015.
Wow, you know the day.
Yeah, it's one of those things you never forget. Like never forget the journey that you go through. So we've got like the certificate posted on the website.
Somebody's here. So you got. Hey.
Yeah, he's been ushered away.
Aww.
He's got a handler.
Well, so since 2015, right? And if you've started the company since 2015, that's 6 years to where you've got to right now. And you know, people might think that, you know, Union54 is actually much younger than a 6-year journey. And this is why I asked you the question on the date. How have you been fundraising? Because my understanding is you've gone through seed funding, then you've done Y Combinator. I think you were one of the first companies to go through Y Combinator. Were you the first or one of the first? I'm not sure.
First one in Zambia.
Right. And then you've then recently got funding from Tiger Global. Is that right? Right.
Yeah, so that's correct.
Walk us through, you know, those 3 journeys, how tough it was or how easy it was, and what that experience was like for you, like going through the process of the initial phase of Zasu maturing, then going through Y Combinator. Tell us about those 3 things and what state of mind you were in, what the business was, and how tough it was to do that fundraising.
Yeah. So for us, each fundraising that we did was kind of like a graduating from initial idea stage, where we first raised £30,000, I believe. And with that, the idea was that we're going to use this. That was the most amount of money I had ever raised or ever put my hands on. So that was very exciting, like a lot of responsibility to manage people's money. And then we used that to be able to develop the initial prototype. And then we got to a point where we had signed a few contracts with large retailers and say to our investors, hey, this is now working. What can we do? And I think we raised $200,000 in 2017, which again was like, in today's environment, it seems minuscule, but going from 30K to 200,000, that was quite a lot. And we used that, and we went and got ourselves a Bank of Zambia license, and we went and got ourselves like.
And these are all angel investors.
All angel investors.
Are they still investors today?
Absolutely, they're still investors.
Thrilled.
So, and this is one thing that's been very important, because we've shown that we've got the staying power, that we're always going to make it through. So Union54 is unique in that it's myself and my wife who started it, even before we had our first son. So it feels very much, a lot of like people say their company is their baby, but in our case, it's like, it could not be more true. So we've made decisions to make sure that we know that we are under more scrutiny because of the personal relationship. I know that people who give me money are going to be looking at the investment. Oh, I've invested in a Black founder. If we do anything untoward, then it affects somebody else after or even before us, right? So there's always a lot of commitment that you do when you're raising money. But in our case, we were never appropriate for VCs up until we got into YC. And when we got into YC, that was like the real turning point where we're able to articulate the future that we wanted to develop, because we'd learned so much about the risks, about the direction we want to go into.
But how did that happen? How did you get to YC or YC get to you? How did that happen in the first place? I mean,
yeah, so we actually applied to YC a few times before that, and we had an interview with them to go into the winter 2021 batch, I think. And in our application for that batch, we said we wanted to develop Union54, and Union54 was going to be doing all of this settlement across fintechs in different African markets. So when we jumped on the interview, it actually turned into like a product development session where we're like, okay, but how do you get to this point where you've got all of these fintechs using you to be able to do all of this? And in actually dissecting that, that's when we realized that step one is to build on what we know right now, which is giving people an API so that we can show that we're partners for the long term and giving them the ability to earn revenue interchange from us. And when we were able to do that, we actually got accepted. And when we got accepted, we actually had a list of clients that we were just calling, say, hey, the product is ready, let's start to do that development. And because once we were on YC, it wasn't, this is a Zambia opportunity, which Zazu as a challenger bank is still limited by today. But with Union54, it's actually, hey, this is a Pan-African opportunity. If we wanted, we can issue cards for companies in Brazil or in Mexico today, but we don't understand that regulatory framework. Yeah. So we chose to just focus on Africa because that's where we're passionate about, and that's where we've got customers. But it's been a progression.
Amazing.
Yes, can I just pick up on that point about, again, building for Africa? You said, I don't want to do right now, say Brazil or wherever, because I don't understand them, but regulations must be so different in these different countries. How much of a how much do you need to understand as Union54, the regulations in, I don't know, a Nigeria versus a Morocco versus a Tanzania? Or actually that's something your clients you just worry about the tech, or can you just not build the tech unless you understand like the regulatory environment, because fintech, financial services is a regulated product. So because one of the things we hear this pitch from fintech entrepreneurs like yourself, I'm building for Africa. And then when you talk to people privately, they go, nah, that's just what they tell the US-based investors.
Okay. So our product, the thing that we do is help you issue a virtual card or a physical card from next year. But what we're actually giving you is the ability to launch in new markets faster than you would do on your own. Because for us to be able to issue those cards, there's several licensing processes we've gone through. For us to operate the business, there's several licenses that we hold from central banks. So it's a combination of us doing daily regulatory scans or even quarterly to say in Nigeria, you can issue a card if you're doing X, Y, B, and C. If you're in Morocco, you can issue a card if you're doing X, Y, B, and C. So by the time that you do the production with us, integration into production with us, then we already have certified for those. So you can just quickly set up your program up and running. So when we say we're developing for Africa, the product can be used by African consumers, but we actually have a lot of compliancing work that's being done in the background. And that's a unique product that we're selling, where as an fintech integrating into Union54, you don't need to understand how chargebacks are handled. You don't need to understand how settlement is handled between the merchants and the scheme. Nor do you need to have like a very sophisticated overview of what regulatory requirements are in your market, because we help you to be able to comply with those. So that's one of the things that we are actually helping people with.
Yeah. One last question for me, I know we're running out of time, is again, just maybe to bring this building for Africa remotely point to life. We were chatting before we went live about Nigeria is your biggest or one of your biggest markets, and you don't set foot in the exciting city of Lagos. You do it remotely. In 60 seconds, how did you build a business in Nigeria remotely?
So like I said, Zoom, the combination of Zoom and the pandemic has just made people more willing to do business with each other. There's always this kind of like outdated saying by people a little bit older than me, like, oh, Nigerians only want to do business with Nigerians, but that's just not true. Nigerians, entrepreneurs are just like any other founder in the world. They want to do business with somebody who's going to give them a good product, save them money, and just do what it does. So for us, we've just been focusing on finding people who are committed to doing what they want to do, and we help them to do that quite easily and on the fairest terms. So our USP is that you don't need to know Perseus personally for you to use Union54. You can just do it on Zoom, on WhatsApp.
And these clients, are they all new economy clients, or are they also what you'd call old economy?
So we've got different fintechs. We've got people who are fintech adjacent, so maybe they've got like peer-to-peer exchanges. But we also have aggregators, so people who are actually issuing on behalf of other more traditional businesses. We actually have like a boarding school issuing cards or doing the integration into us. We have churches. We've got all of the exciting cool kids on the block that are doing TechCrunch. And that's an exciting thing, right? That
issuing or helping issue debit cards for churches in Nigeria or other countries.
Other countries.
Other countries.
So
Wow.
they want to use it for an expense card, or they want to
Yeah,
be able to
sure.
use it to put their branding left, right, and
Yeah.
center.
Uh,
Yeah, so that's the exciting thing.
Amazing, amazing. Gaurav, I'm going to hand it back to you because I think we're like way over time, but
I don't know if we're way over time, but I'm just going to close with the banger, right? I mean, Perseus, you raise money from Tiger, right? I mean, they're one of the biggest names out there. They're one of the most well-known names out there. Was that them approaching you, you approaching them? How did that happen? How quickly did it happen? And I mean, obviously, officially, you're going to say you're very happy about it, but how thrilled are you about the whole piece?
And what was
Everything
your
you've
role at
read.
YC in all of this? Like, was being in YC like a game changer, or were you already getting these approaches before YC?
So Tiger couldn't have cared less if we were on YC. The intro happened because one of our angel investors, a guy called Kian, shout out to Kian if you're listening to this, Kasiri, he made the intro. I was like, bro.
You mean Kian?
Yeah.
You know Kian?
Yeah.
Same Kian?
Yeah.
I'm calling him right now. He is a legend. This man is a legend.
Kian made the intro. I was like, bro, this is way too early for Tiger. And then Tiger took a month to come back because we couldn't just find the time to speak. When we spoke, it was half an hour where they knew what we were trying to do. They knew the players in the market, and I got the feeling that they had used the product because they were asking very specific questions. And within within that call, they had made an offer. So I had then had to figure out how, because we'd already raised money that we wanted at that point. So I'm the one who kind of delayed the process because I wanted to think about, because Tiger, a big fund, like you said, does it make sense to have them at the seed stage or to wait for the next round? How does that change incentives, and what's the relationship going to be like? But everything you've read about Tiger is true. Like, I've never seen anything like it. Amazing company to work with. Yeah, extremely fair terms.
Well,
Half an hour. That was it.
Incredible. That's incredible.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I wish it was longer.
I know.
Well, you know, we might have to do a follow-up session with Union54 and see how things do, almost like an update session. Like, where are you now, and you know how are things going? Because I think talking about churches issuing cards and everything else is another whole conversation. So, Perseus, really, thank you for your time. Congratulations. You know, it's great to see you inspiring more of a spotlight on, you know, the countries and the region and everything else that comes with it. So I wish you all the best and see you soon.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good one.
You too. Enjoy.
Right,
enjoy the Italian Wi-Fi or broadband or whatever you got.
Thanks. We'll do. Speak soon.